Summertime is all about the vegetables, and peak season right now are the tomatoes. So what I've gone ahead and done is made a beautiful little tart with some ricotta cheese and roasted tomatoes on a puff pastry. Let's get cooking with style. This puff pastry tart is super easy thanks to this, the puff pastry in the box. I don't know who makes it anymore, because when you can buy it this cheap, it's the only way to go. You want to take your puff pastry, put a little bit of flour over the top, and we're just going to gently roll it to make it a little bit longer. And you want to be sure to work with this puff pastry right as it comes out of the refrigerator. You're going to thaw it overnight. You're going to score the edges, don't cut all the way through. All right, we're just scoring, so we don't want to cut all the way through. And then we're going to take a fork and we're going to punch inside the scoring. This is going to let the steam come out so the edges get puffy and the center stays nice and low. I'm going to scoot this out of the way, bring up, because I'm going to be doing two of these. I have two puff pastry sheets in the package. I'm going to lay this down like so. And now we're just going to take an egg wash that we prepared, and we're going to put that on the edge so we can put a little bit of salt around that to kind of add a little bit of texture and a little bit of savoriness to our tart. So we get that all the way around the edge, and I've got my oven preheated at 400 degrees, and we'll just take a little bit of salt and run that around. Not a lot, just enough to kind of add a little something to it. Now, at the same time, while the puff pastry is in the oven, we're going to get our tomatoes going. I've got a 1/4 cup of olive oil. I've got my garlic and red peppers. We're going to put that in there, and then we're going to take a healthy pinch, probably about a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. We're going to go ahead and toss this, get everything coated well. And you can see there's not a lot of work to this. It's pretty straightforward and easy. Now to this, I'm going to take my tomatoes, put them in my baking dish here, give that a little shake. Let's head over to the oven and get things roasting. So my oven's preheated to 400 degrees. Follow the directions on your puff pastry. We're going to put the tomatoes in the bottom. I'm going to put the puff pastry on top. That way I can keep my eye on it. And also, I've got a little parchment paper between the cookie sheet and the puff pastry. So while the puff pastry is baking and those tomatoes are roasting, let's get the ricotta ready. Now, you see this liquid in here? We want to get rid of that. So we're just going to take a paper towel and soak that up. Now, if you've got a fine mesh strainer, like I don't have, you don't have to do this, but this is my workaround. So we get rid of the excess liquid. To this, we're gonna add chives, get all of them in there, a nice good pinch, about a tablespoon of Italian parsley, Parmesan cheese, and lemon juice. And this is really how simple it is. All this will come together, we'll mix this up, and we'll set this aside while the puff pastry gets going. We'll put this back in the refrigerator so it tightens up a little bit, and everything will be ready to go. Looks good, doesn't it? So we pulled the puff pastry out of the oven because the center is rising with it. Along that score line, I'm just taking my fork and pressing this down so the edges stay up, and I'll give a couple extra pokes in the center and get it back in the oven. So it's been about 20-25 minutes. Let's look at this puff pastry. That looks absolutely perfect. And then we'll pull the tomatoes out as well. We're gonna let this cool for about 15 or 20 minutes. So I've let this puff pastry come down to room temperature. Part of the reason we're not putting this ricotta cheese on when it's warm, because if I put it on when it was warm, it would just soak up all this moisture in here and this thing would become soggy. We're gonna spread this around. I've got enough here for 2 of these puff pastry little beauties here. And to this, I'm going to take half my tomatoes, because like I said, we've got 2 of these to do. And we're just going to sprinkle this over the top. Move those around, so you got to kind of eyeball it here, okay? There we go. So that looks pretty darn close. And then to this, we're going to take, and I did it again, I said to this, but we'll add some beautifully sliced pieces of basil on top. And then finishing it all off, I've got this lemon. I'm zesting at the very end because the oil from the lemon skin is going to get on top of that beautiful little tart that we've got here. Shake that off like that. We'll go ahead and cut it using my pizza knife. Oh my goodness, look at that. Oh, believe me, this tastes as good as it looks. So a nice ricotta and roasted tomato tart with a nice puff pastry. This is an excellent little dish to have to start your evening off, or just about any time during the summer. If you'd like this recipe and all the ones we're making here on Cooking with Styles, you can go to cbs8.com. Enjoy.